Debating against net-centric warfare. Net-centric warfare is a military doctrine or theory of war which seeks to translate an information advantage through the robust networking of well-informed, geographically dispersed forces. Net-centric warfare is not an appropriate strategy for today's military forces because 1. Political warfare is more effective. 2. Net-centric warfare is unreliable. 3. It's transferable to enemies so they can use it against you. 4. There's resistance to revolutionary change when using net-centric warfare. 5. There's cultural resistance within your own country. And 6, and perhaps most importantly, it has a negative effect on soldiers. Fourth-generation warfare is conflict characterized by blurring of the lines between war and politics, soldiers and civilians. Technology should not be the center of modern warfare because politics can play a much greater role. Superior political will, when properly employed, can defeat greater economic and military forces. The Chinese general and strategist Sun Tzu, in the ancient military strategy book The Art of War, quotes, "To win 100 victories in 100 battles is not the highest excellence. The highest excellence is to subdue the enemy's army without fighting at all. The expert in using the military subdues the enemy's forces without going to battle, takes the enemy's walled cities without launching an attack, and crushes the enemy's states without protracted war." Political devices are used to create strategic partnerships and affiliations between countries or to isolate an enemy. Political war targets civilian population and political bodies directly by rendering the military proficiency of the enemy irrelevant and damaging its morale. As the Macedonian King Philip II said, "Divide and conquer." Once a population is divided and not supporting the decision of war as a whole, one can fight many small powers separated rather than fight an allied power of the combined smaller forces. To this effect, economic influence can be used to sabotage rival states' economies through the use of sanctions or tariffs, and that can be achieved by using the economic influence to add pressure on a country. The more developed a country is, the more it is vulnerable to cyber attacks on its own infrastructure. For example, the enemy can hack into military IT and take control or steal information which could shift the results of war in their favor. Hackers can be paid from anywhere in the world, and so the enemy can have a much larger pool of talent to be eager to take on such a challenge. The opposition can use bots to deceive a military. If the military uses drones to collect data on the enemy, then the enemy can also use bots to give false information to the military. With inaccurate data, the commanders would make false assumptions and wrong decisions. Like chaos theory, the smallest ripple in information could cause a catastrophic result. This has been seen in the past with Morse code. Enemies would send out false reports to mask their true intentions. Technology is still not advanced enough for accurate data collection. Incorrect data could cause decision makers to make false assumptions and potentially lose a war. For example, GPS coverage is weak in many areas of the world. If soldiers are trained to be reliant on technology, what will they do when they're in one of these areas and find they do not have GPS reception? This could cause chaos and would ultimately slow down any operation they're trying to accomplish. Enemies can also block or knock out GPS channels, which could ruin military tactics. This could be enough for the enemy to create a counterattack. In addition to this, countries such as North Korea and China run their own internet services and have total control over what happens on their network. Therefore, a net-centric warfare strategy would not be effective in this region because governments know everything that happens on their own network. Net-centric attacks are not good investments for countries to make because they're so easy to copy. Once a technology has been developed, it can be easily adopted and modified. The high cost of development is mostly absorbed by the country that develops it first, while other countries that copy the technology have to spend less for the same amount of sophistication. Hence, technology that you develop could be very easily used against you. This type of system is inherently less secure than traditional warfare. While schematics for a bomb can be kept under lock and key, once a cyber attack is released into the wild, it can be free for anyone to analyze, recreate, and deceive. For example, drone technology was used to kill Saddam Hussein. Amazon now has drones that deliver goods to your doorstep. This type of rapid technology development is seen in many instances the world over. Technology has always been tough to implement and then easy to get around. Looking at the state of cyber attacks, we can see this. The amount of work taken to develop Microsoft's IIS server was exponential compared to the work required to make the code red worm that rendered a lot of those machines useless for a long period of time. On the other hand, the amount of time taken to create a workaround so that the worm was useless was even less than the time to develop the worm. Cryptography-based systems have consistently been easier to implement for reactionary uses than development uses. By primarily focusing on net-centric warfare, you spend more resources than your enemy and only disadvantage them temporarily. The main argument of this point is that anything you create, the enemy can react to faster. War doesn't follow a business model. There are no patents. There's minimal advantage to being first in the market, especially when your IP can be copied by your own enemy. There's also a large resistance to revolutionary change when you're using NCW. The high budget required does not allow all countries to participate in this. Even if you do have the budget for this, a lot of time will be wasted in the training of soldiers, creating documentation, and other software needs. This can cause disruption in performance and takes extra time to implement a system because you have to train people. There's also a lot of cultural resistance to NCW. Some countries or people are not interested in sharing relevant data with other countries. There's a large feeling of, that's not how we do things. People believe their way is right and are not interested in following another country's path. Soldiers can become too dependent on technology. For example, if they're using GPS for directions, using wireless information to gather data, all kinds of things like that. These technologies are very helpful, but can cause issues when they malfunction. What if a soldier got lost because he didn't have a GPS signal? Soldiers may lose their mental toughness if they're justifying killing somebody with something like a drone warfare machine because they're not in any mental danger. In conclusion, net-centric warfare is not an appropriate strategy for today's modern military forces because technology is not advanced to a point where it can have the required security, connectivity, and human-to-machine interface to operate effectively. Many countries cannot adopt this method due to cultural and economic standings. For these reasons, we believe that technological warfare should not be used by people over the world.